This podcast is brought to you by Hills Community Aid and has been funded by Castle Hill RSL. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Good Men Don't podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about how to build respectful relationships and addressing the issues of domestic and family violence. Today we'll be talking about, survivors, and the topic itself is called I Am a Survivor. Now, I guess I want to talk about why is it important to talk to survivors and I guess hear their stories. And for me personally, and I think most people can agree, it just helps maybe dissolve some stereotypes, and it, I guess, helps us in, moving forward and understanding what helps best and understanding stories, because not everything's the same, not everyone's stories is the same. So it's so important to listen. So I'm one of your co-hosts, Levi, and here with me today is Warren, my other co-host. Warren, could you please say hi? How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Levi. It's interesting listening to you just talk about why we're talking about a survivor story today. And I think the thing is, for me, I spoke to a group of people about the podcast last week, and one of the things I said to them is that since becoming involved, I've realised how broad this topic is.
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion after thinking about it that we cannot tell the full story unless we speak to some survivors and some victims to try and understand, because that is where a lot of the impact occurs. You know, it's not with the male, the perpetrator, but it's on the victim side. So we ought to start to understand that, because I think in that way that men who are, guys, if you're listening in at home, then hopefully you can start to understand the breadth of this topic in a far better way. So that's, for me, is what we're going to be doing. So let's get into it, shall we? Yeah. So we have a guest today, and that guest is chosen to remain anonymous. So you won't be seeing this person's face on camera, and we'll be camouflaging her voice a little bit, just so that just to ensure that anonymity, I get the word right, is there. So, but for the sake of this conversation today, we're going to refer to our guest as Sarah. So, Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
We're really pleased that you've taken the time to come along today, and we really appreciate you giving us your time. I guess I just want to ask a couple of questions, just in terms of settling in to, I guess, how you're feeling at the moment.
The truth is that I am quite nervous, and I certainly have thought about whether or not to do this podcast over a good month. Yep. I've swayed backwards and forwards, and I think I realized I wanted to sit proud on a camera and to be seen, but the truth is, you have to be very careful with your perpetrator. Yep. And you need to make sure that I'm safe, and safety is a huge issue. Yeah, and for my family.
Yeah, and certainly, Sarah, if at any time as we go through this process, the questions, if you're not feeling safe, the question you think might expose you in some way, just tell us and we'll just skip the question.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's really important.
Yes.
And I can't pretend to say I know how you feel or anything like that, but I've spoken to a few survivors like yourself, and they all say the same thing in many ways, that they need to feel safe and secure. So I guess, is there anything in the notes that you've written that you're not comfortable in talking about today?
I guess, no, I would like to discuss most topics if I can. It's just purely the identifiable issues. If you find me saying something that identifies me, then just let me know.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, let's sort of get into the first part. And I guess this is part of the early relationship you had with your ex-husband. And I think the thing that I'd like to sort of understand is, initially, what was the relationship like as you sort of got into a relationship and then got engaged and got married?
And it was with a group of people, so it's a large group, and it was sociable, and it was mostly men, so that was, nice to mix with men. and I enjoyed their company. He appeared to be quite a shy guy, and in fact, one of the things with domestic violence and particularly coercive control is that it's shown through research that the people who unfortunately are involved with this issue are empathic people. So we call them empaths. And the research shows that often these guys, when you first meet them, you see them just a little bit shy and a little bit sad. And that does something to someone who's empathic that makes you interested in them or, care for people. So, the early relationship was lovely, relaxing, and slowed me down, and we got on so well, in fact. And I thought, oh boy, I was lucky to investigate more with this guy. And we had a very happy relationship at the beginning. And ironically, I felt in control of that relationship initially. But of course, later on, that's not the case. That's
okay. So that aspect of empathic that you mentioned before, is that something you've become aware of after the event?
Yes, because I've actually been involved in a few domestic violence groups, and it's interesting when I've looked at the groups of women, it's been all just women. Of course, I do recognize it's men as well. The women, I thought, what's the common factor? And I couldn't work it out for a while because we're from all different walks of life. This is a phenomenon that's goes all through demographics, all through different aspects of life. And then I realized they're all empathetic and caring. So that's an interesting factor.
Yeah.
Okay. So in hindsight, looking back, were there any early signs that maybe you missed? You're in that sort of
the romantic stage, the honeymoon phase, and they call it love bombing. Yeah. And it's very difficult to identify love bombing because it seems just like at the normal beginning of a relationship where you're a bit heady and, feeling very happy. But I suppose I was of an age where I'd been single for a while, and I was thinking I was rather fussy, so I thought I'll be honest, I felt like I ignored some early warning signs. And many people will say this, but you can only know it in retrospect. Yeah. You don't know it at the time. But I can remember he was different to me. I was a real go-getter. I traveled around the world on my own. And really was taking the bull by the horns with regard to my own life. And so that looks very attractive to these guys who I would describe him as a covert narcissist. No, he's not diagnosed, but of those traits, the shy narcissist, who's often very hard to identify.
That's okay. So maybe just ask you another question about how your ex-husband made you feel in those early days.
Well, he made me feel great. I'm confident, in control, and I wasn't too didn't want to go into a relationship because you feel like you lose control or you lose yourself. But suddenly I had this guy that was so open and listening to me, and I thought, great, this is wonderful.
Yeah, Sarah, you mentioned the honeymoon phase, and I feel like that's such an interesting time where you kind of are looking for reasons to make things work and make things right. And you're right, in retrospect, when you see things after it all, you're probably like, oh, that was not a great situation, or whatever it is. So I guess in saying that, how did things, or when did you know when things were beginning to change and, you could see more of those red flags and signs which didn't really align with what you liked as a person?
Again, most of it's in retrospect, but it's a very confusing experience because it's only very small changes that happen, and you're a little bit like, the scenario of a frog in a pot that's boiling. Yeah. As if the water starts off cold, you don't notice that it's getting hotter, but if you got through into boiling pot, you would know straight away. So I'll just give you an example. When I look back now, I remember it's about 6 months into the relationship. I'd gone to bed first, and then he'd come into the bedroom. Now, one of the things I always enjoyed was to go to the library and get books on all sorts of topics to broaden my horizons, and I very much enjoyed that. And he came into the bedroom and I was reading a library book, and he just made a comment of, "Oh, that's not very romantic." And I thought, "Oh, I can't read books in bed, can I?" And I complied. So it's one little occurrence where I gave in. Yep, because I thought, "Oh, I think I'm wrong." And it's the start of that coercive control. Now, coercive control is not an obvious thing. Sometimes people would think that they're saying directly to you, "You can't go out, you can't spend money." It's just subliminal. You don't know it's happening to you. It's a suggestion or a little seed planted in your brain that makes you think, "Oh, I really shouldn't spend that money." Particularly when you're married. "Oh, no, it's different. I know I need to think of the other person." But in fact, all you're doing is submitting to their request. Yeah.
It's interesting, Levi, that a number of people who have mentioned
I was
the
just
coercive
about to say,
control,
yeah.
how it starts off small and almost insignificant
Yeah.
in some ways, but then gradually over time builds and builds and builds until a time when,
And then you've given away, little increments, and then suddenly you realize it's equivalent to a large occurrence. So then it's a bit as if you have given permission, but you haven't. It's just been such a slow process. Yeah. It's very difficult to pinpoint when the relationship changed. Okay, very, very difficult. There was subtle comments suggesting how the relationship should be. I had to expect less. And especially now, I said before I was married, it was like, well, now we're married. I was a little confused, and I realized I wasn't developing as a single entity. I was one of two. Now, it's a bit like everything that he would have said could have been explained in a very logical, and I would find at times I might question things, and it was as if he could suddenly see that I'd got the lens over the subject and was just about to see, and then something else would be said that would send me off in another direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
We recently had Rob and Deb Sanasi. They were both perpetrator and survivor, saying very similar things, and actually use the exact same analogy of the frog in the boiling
Absolutely.
water, where it just kind of just gradually happens, and before you know it, it's kind of too late. It's a really tough situation to be in. And I guess, you saw that side, but hearing Rob, I think he was saying he knew it, but also wanted more control, more dominance, because he was like, well, why wouldn't I want more control? Because this is, more control to him. So yeah, it's very interesting, because you also mentioned the common denominators for, I guess, perpetrators, and it sounds like this is one of those things where perpetrators just want to be in control, which is essentially coercive control, right? So I guess in saying that, did you notice how your behaviors may have shifted or feelings may have shifted after all of this? I guess the negative side of things started to transpire.
Well, I realized that, as I said, I wasn't growing as a single entity. I was, for someone who read widely, was no longer, and I couldn't even listen to music. So, oh no, that's too loud, and that was something out. So the things I enjoyed were getting removed. Yeah, and that was but it was so subtle you don't notice. Life was more mundane. Yep. A friend of mine had also noticed that we were always together as well, that myself and my ex-partner, we were always hardly ever on my own, right? When it came to mixing with other people, right? You could say, oh, well, we're married now, that, oh, you're a couple, that's, nice, but I was gradually losing myself and my own identity. And now this has gone on. For me, it went on for decades. And I wonder how that happened, but it's actually like being in a hostage situation. You're walking on eggshells all the time because this person gets increasingly moody. When, as I said about, and suddenly I was starting to see what was happening, and he realized often, if he didn't have an answer, he would then go off and sulk for a couple of days, right? Which was more punishment, yep. So you think, oh, do I really need that punishment? I'll curtail what I'm doing. It wasn't very pleasant.
So a question about notice. This one's not on the list, but it seems to me what you're saying, the coercive control, was mainly emotional abuse. There's no physical abuse?
Well, I thought there wasn't physical abuse, Rathake. As in, I was never hit, and this is the problem. If you're almost you wish to be hit by the end because it's immeasurable, an event, whereas coercive control, you're always told it's all in your imagination, you're being hysterical. But there was plenty of physical abuse when I realized he would stand in the door of the bedroom. He's a big guy. His shoulders would fill the door, yes, and then he would hold me to, cuddle me. But it was a restraint. It wasn't a cuddle.
It wasn't a loving hug.
No, it was preventing me from leaving in the room. And so that is physical abuse. And later on, I'll touch on the fact that I was very unwell at the end, right?
Yeah.
So how did that control and that abuse affect your self-worth, your feeling about yourself?
Oh my goodness, it just, you don't know what your opinion is on things. Now this is someone that would have been was quite opinionated and quite lively. Now, the reason they do it is because he's just an empty person. He's a husk of a person. So he would have been attracted to my outgoing, even when I came in here, I'm able to chat, he would have struggled. I was able to just chat to her, and my daughters were always laughing. I'll be somewhere and I'm always talking to someone who I've just made a new friend, and whereas he couldn't start. So he took some of my liveliness and my vibrance and took it for himself.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, just furthering that, do you think his shortcomings in that area of his life kind of led him to just grab onto you and then just take your life away just so he could get something?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So he would crave for any attention from me. And since we've separated, I've got to be very careful not to give negative, not to give positive. Even if I screamed at him, I'm beyond that stage now. And I don't tend to, I'm a reasonably calm person. If I screamed at him, it would be giving him attention. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah. The interesting thing, you talked about that sort of the frog in the water and gradually heats up, and you don't know that it's heating up. So I guess I'm intrigued as to when you suddenly twig that this is abuse.
Oh.
You know?
Yep, I was so gaslit that I just couldn't believe it was happening. Yeah, it's like as if I was looking at two people. Okay, the abuse was terrible, but I couldn't believe it was happening to me. There's a degree of embarrassment as well, but it was the shame. Oh my goodness. How did I get myself in this position? Well, I didn't get myself in that position. I had a very skilled perpetrator who got me in that position.
So in terms of then starting to see the abuse, was there anything or anyone that helped you to recognise?
Absolutely. I had a very good friend who was watching from afar, and she could see that I was changing. She actually thought I had Alzheimer's, right? Well, because it affects your brain. As in, with the abuse, it actually structurally changes your brain. So the amygdala at the front, it is involved with fight and flight. Now mine would be larger than normal, and the hippocampus, which involves your executive skills, your planning, your memory, has shrunk. They've shown that in research. Of course, no one can see that. No. Now, if my head was hit off a wall and I went to emergency and there was bleeding in my brain, that would be different, yeah. But with this, you cannot see it. So my friend thought that I had early dementia, right? And I was thinking maybe I've got early dementia because I just I used to do a lot of organizing of events, and I just didn't really have those skills to plan and put things in place. And it was worrying me. But I went one day, she sort of invited me round for a cup of tea, and while we're in her kitchen, she said, "Right, now what's going on?"
Right.
Just quickly, it sounds like you you kind of looked at yourself before thinking your husband or your partner was doing this to you, where you thought there was a problem with yourself, and this is like, early dementia or Alzheimer's, as opposed to like wanting to accept that he was just an abusive person, which is really, it sounds very upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and when you make those vows at a wedding, you do not, and this is the in sickness and in health. This is that part that you say. But when I was at my friend's house, I remember her just leaving a big gap and not saying anything and saying, "What's going on?" And I started to bowl up and get upset. And then I had to say, I didn't use the words abuse. I just said, "I'm not happy. He doesn't treat me well."
So hard to.
Yeah.
You don't want to, I feel like you don't ever want to say that to a partner, because you're right, vows, and it means a lot to a lot of people. So when you say, "Oh yes, my partner is abusing me," like I could only imagine how difficult it must be.
Well, then you're on a roller coaster, and I very much was trying desperately to protect my daughters. So I was the buffer between him and them. Well, I thought I was doing what I could, but of course, there was direct abuse to them as well. So I would try and take the brunt of his angry outbursts, and but it was at the same time parts of me were being chipped away. So and my brain is not working in the same way, but you don't know, and you don't know that's happening. I was also, in retrospect, realizing I was falling into deep depression, anxiety. My fight and flight was, oh my goodness, my hypervigilance I was slowly being reprogrammed, I guess. It was a hostage situation, but in my own home, where there were things like he would stalk me. So what I mean is he would turn up at a place. I might be having lunch with a friend, and this was not very often. He'd reduced the amount of times I could leave the house. Yep. And this is quite unbelievable, but now to look back, I used to maybe meet up with people for coffee, but I always paid in cash so he wouldn't see that. And I wouldn't stay very long, and while I was there for my 20 minutes, the phone would be going regularly round, just with, oh, can you pick up bread and milk, and all these sort of things, just letting me know, I know that you're out there, and you need to come back. But he turned up at a cafe a few times. Well, no, he must, I don't know how he was tracking me, but just to let me know.
Yeah, because a lot of that's also about what we're going to talk about in a moment, and that's your independence and taking that away from you. And Levi, you've got some questions there around that might be really useful to track down on a little bit.
I guess you've touched on it a bit already, but in terms of isolation, like what were some of the techniques? Maybe he physically isolated you from people, or it was those text messages, which is quite scary. It's pretty passive aggressive. Hey, like the multiple text, and then saying we need eggs and bread and things like that. But obviously in your head you'd just be going 1,000 miles a minute. Yeah,
I actually would get quite triggered by phones beeping, so I had to change my tone. The sound of my phone. Sorry, can you just repeat the question? Sorry. No.
That's okay. So in terms of isolation, you touched on it already, how some of the techniques he used to try and isolate you in terms of maybe messaging you on your phone when you're out, or even turning up to certain areas. Was there anything else that he was doing?
It depended who I was seeing. Now, I look back now, and if he thought that someone was clued on to what was going on, he would say things like, oh, they're a bit strange, aren't they? I wouldn't like, something very derogatory about that person to try and put me off, because they would know. He's cut me off from my family, which has upset me. They're from overseas. When we would see his family, that was fine, and I had no problem with seeing his family, but there was never time for me to ring my family, and that would go on for months on end, and they were actually getting quite used to not hearing from me very often. But I am close to my family, particularly my father. Apparently understood what was going on, but didn't understand. He was out over visiting. They live overseas, and he could see, and he thought, oh my goodness, he's controlling her. Run. This was probably about 15 years ago, or maybe more, And he was looking for bruises. There was nothing back then like coercive control. And I think if you don't mind, I might just take the opportunity to speak to who is listening to this podcast. Coercive control is something it's not obvious. And if you're listening to this and in your relationship, you're feeling a bit confused at times, and whenever you do challenge things, often a very strange answer will come from your partner. If you're not developing as a person like I felt, consider what is happening to you. And if you're not happy, there are always little scores that you can do online. Obviously remove your history. I can understand that I was very paranoid that he could see everything, and I do believe they had cameras in the house, because I would just sit down and he would be there coming down the stairs, so he knew what I was doing at all times. So in fact, I was given a survey when I was in hospital, which I'm going a little bit ahead, and I still wasn't sure if it was domestic violence, and this a social worker gave me a survey, and it was all about the different parts, different sections of domestic violence. So physical, emotional, sexual. Sorry, I'm trying to think of all of them. And on these questions, I would answer yes or no. And at times, I'd go, oh no, I'll give him a bit leeway there and say no, nothing happened. Well, when I got to the end, she scored my sort of survey. And if domestic violence existed, I would score 5 and over. Well, I scored 25. Well, right. So that speaks volumes here. And that really helped me to go, yep, 25. Supposed to be, this is you giving him leeway too. Giving him leeway as well. Because I thought there was no physical abuse. So, yep, that there is you don't know, you're so gaslighted that you're really not sure of yourself, and so hence when you do leave, it's very hard for you to be capable of expressing yourself and giving episodes that are measurable. So it's going to be awfully hard to prove coercive control.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess in saying that, thank you for talking to our listeners about that. And I guess also on the other side of things, or if, there's anyone out there who feels like they are maybe taking control of their partner in any of these areas, maybe it's a time to just rethink about how you go about these certain situations. And, maybe you are being quite controlling and it can turn into abuse. So maybe just give a thought into that if that's happening in the household. So during this time of isolation, do you feel like you lost friends, family, or any?
That's absolutely. And I certainly did. And I remember commenting to friends, meeting anyone new. I'm seeing the people that he thought were okay. I was not making plans for myself. I was very much a person that planned. I did a lot of traveling. This doesn't come without plans. It's all brave stuff. It is. I felt like, as I said, the environment I was walking on gave chills, whether or not he would go into a mood, whether or not he'd shout at us. And the rules would change as well. So, you would, I would never know how the rules would change. It was like standing on shifting sand. There was no solid foundation to our family life or to my life. And that was just so confusing for me. I felt like it was like a rudderless boat on the water, with no control as to where I was going. And the years were just rolling in. And so, it was a very confusing time.
So, Sarah, one of the things you mentioned, you mentioned us. So, you had a family at this point in time?
No, we didn't have a family for a while, but in retrospect, the abuse when I did fall pregnant ramped up. And this is what the research shows, it ramps up. And when I'd learned this years ago, I thought, how could you do that? She's so, you're so vulnerable when you're pregnant. But of course, that's the time for the perpetrators to make the most effect on you. So I fell pregnant with my first daughter. And I think he felt challenged. I could no longer be available for him whenever he wanted. He made me keep going hard at the weekends, and in the end I said, "Do you want me to lose this baby?" And I was met with silence. And I thought, oh dear. But again, I sort of excused his behavior. Oh, this baby, you want them to come into the world with 2 parents, yeah. I believe actually I wasn't meant to fall pregnant. I was meant only to be with him, and he would be, poor soul, he Sarah couldn't have children.
So the effect that would have on you as a potential mother at that point in time must, in terms of your self-worth and your self-esteem and everything else, must have been enormous.
Oh, absolutely. At that time, you are so vulnerable and you need a really protective partner, someone who's encouraging, but I don't remember much that was encouraging.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is it kind of like you don't know what you don't know, where this was the norm for you? Did you ever feel like this was a normal, day-to-day thing that every couple goes through or every family goes through?
I just didn't know because I didn't get to see what other couples behave like, but when I did, I thought, oh, yeah, they appeared to be more true friends, whereas I wasn't. And then when you're a mum, when you've got first, baby and a toddler like I had, you don't really have your own life. They're so needy. But then I saw my contemporaries start to go away for weekends and things like that, and I thought, oh, when will I do that, and it never came.
I think there's a part that sort of occurs to me as your children got older, I guess they still saw the abuse and saw what was happening, and I guess because they're not protected from that at all, they just see it and they absorb it in lots of ways. I guess, can you talk a little bit to us about how they were, how you understood they were feeling and how they were absorbing it or whatever?
I understand a baby very much knows their cortisol levels are higher. Yep. They're under stress. Yep. I had cortisol flying around my body. I was stressed the whole time, ready for whatever the bomb that was going to go off in the house. I tried to protect the girls, but you can't fully. They may not be in the room, but they can hear it. And I felt they didn't deserve this version of life. This was not on, oh, well, I'll protect them. No, I'll get in the way. I'll be the buffer. The girls were okay until they started having a voice of their own, which I was encouraging them to, would ask their opinion on things and really encourage them to be individuals. But this is when there started to be problems, when they would be stubborn, but it would be normal. They had an opinion, even if they're little. They have a right to having a say. And I realized, actually, my human rights were being abused as well. And that's not anything you would ever think would happen to you. And I got on very well with my daughters because I respected them as little people, but he was jealous of that, and any mistakes on my part would be jumped at, pointed out and retold many times. All right, but he would often shout at them, yeah, and that's not good for little brains that are developing.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of them experiencing some of the sort of stuff that you're going through and even being shouted at them, that's abuse in itself. I guess, how have they been able to, you've survived, you've sort of come through, have they been affected in any way, or are they still working through that journey?
Oh no, we've all been very affected, right? We're all in therapy, all on medication, right?
Because one of the things that I've become so much aware of the more we do this podcast is the amount of people that are involved. It's not just a perpetrator and a survivor or a victim. It's all the family. It's all of the
family,
it's the
friends.
Community. It's the neighbours. It's your workmates. It's the police who get caught. It goes on and on and on. So suddenly you have an enormous number of people being affected by essentially one person.
What helped you in your decision to leave when you found out, all right, this is too much, I'm done here?
There was one not good experience where, well, it was all. It's not, I have to explain, it's not every little episode. It's the accumulation of all those things in a 24-hour period or in a year's period that is what wears you down and affects your brain. But he would often pick a fight after dinner, as in, he would ask me something and the girls would know, oh, it's on now. He maybe had a glass of wine and he was...
Prepare yourself for a bad night.
And I could feel it starting and he would ask me something, the same thing, and there could have been 3 answers, and if I gave one answer as the other answer, and whatever I did, I had to look him in the eye. I was looking at him wrong, and there was nothing I could do, like a schoolyard bully who there's no way you can do anything about it. And the girls had ran upstairs away, and a lot of the abuse, I'll be honest with you, I can't remember because your brain protects you. Or you either dissociate at the time, so you're off. It's not daydreaming, but it's a way of looking to one's mechanism. Yeah, or I just can't genuinely remember what happened. But at this particular episode, I had managed to cross the lounge room, but I don't know how I got there. And I sort of came to, and I was lying on the floor with my hands up in a defensive pose, and he was above me. And I'll never forget the look of pleasure and a grin on his face that he'd got me in that position. And I was terrified. And I thought, this has gone to another level. I have to be very careful here. This will become physical. I think he could kill me. So from then on, there was no fighting back, because I knew that I had to be so careful.
Yeah, this is life and death situation.
Absolutely.
Gosh, I'm so sorry that was the case for you. Sounds really difficult. In saying that, separation from what we've been told in our previous guests is the worst time during this whole thing. So yes, it was quite bad leading up to it. During the separation period, what were some of the things you needed to factor in, and what was that period like for you?
Well, it is one of the most dangerous. They're furious because they do not have that supply, that emotional, that energy supply anymore. And that's what they do. They abuse everyone to make themselves feel better because there's nothing in them. There's an empty husk. What actually happened to me, and he was quite furious with it because he had me working from morning till night. And when I did that, he then made it longer and longer. So I fell into the depths of depression. And I didn't know I had depression, but I was crying an awful lot. And, a crying, a real deep crying that you don't let. It's a grief cry, where it comes from really deep down in your body, where you just sob and sob and sob. And I was in quite a state. My friends had got me on antidepressants, and the plan was that they were going to kick in, and then we'll see what happens from there. Because I didn't want to leave my girls with him. Yeah, I really didn't. You could understand that. But one day or one evening I was in the bedroom And I thought, I just can't fight this anymore. And I literally felt my brain just slow right down. And I just went to the bed. And he was so angry because I had to get up and cook meals and things like that, but I just couldn't. And I spoke with a very slow voice, and I was so unwell. And he told the girls I was being lazy, but I was incredibly unwell. And this went on for a few weeks, but after a few days of lying there, I thought, well, I haven't been to the toilet. And I realized that I needed to pass urine, and I managed to get to the bathroom. And I just passed, orange sort of goop. And I realized I was going into renal failure, to which I found a bottle in the bedroom. And I filled it with water, and then I made sure that every time I woke up, at least I drank something. Yeah. Food was not being brought to me because I wasn't obeying the rules by going out to the table to eat. Yeah. And eventually what actually happened was I could feel myself. Every time my daughters would come into the room, I tried to come into life, but it was getting harder and harder. And one night I was basically on the precipice of psychosis, suicidality, and it was the gloomiest feeling I have ever felt in my life, and it felt like I was just going to go over the edge into evil, into an abyss, And I texted a friend to say, this isn't horrible, and they got me into hospital.
What a great friend.
Yeah, otherwise I would genuinely going to die.
So that was the start of your recovery?
Yes. So I went into hospital, and it was remarkable to remove me from that environment. My speech then had intonation, whereas before it was terrible. And I started to accept what had happened to me, Ron. And a plan was put together to work out what I was going to do. The plan was for me to, now there were meetings with him to discuss, this is coercive control, you are a perpetrator of domestic violence. And to this day, he claims he never knew that it's all in Rohesingthia. That's irrelevant, there's nothing he knows in himself. Now, I was to enter the house, and when I left the hospital and asked him if he was leaving, he was supposed to leave, and he just gave me a long-winded answer. I asked him again, and he said, I can't see why I should go. And it was one of the worst things in my life. I had to back out of the house and run and flee from the house. Luckily, he went into a moody episode, so I got a chance to get in a car and drive out, run. So at least I had a car, but we were then homeless for a couple of months. And that was okay by him, and it was used in court that I didn't have stable housing, but that was...
Yeah. And Sarah, how long did it take you to sort of start to rebuild your own sense of self-worth?
Oh, I'm still doing it. It's a real struggle, okay? Because you're used to not making any decisions. Yeah, I can understand that. So we had to find somewhere to stay. Yes, it was interesting, and I was still very depressed, so that was difficult.
Well,
yeah, I guess. Like in terms of independence, what I guess helps you on your journey to becoming a bit more independent, and I guess over this time you're still learning, what are some things that are helping you regain that side of yourself that you once were? You said you were very lively, you traveled solo, you've done lots of things. Do you think you'll ever get back to that stage, or you're a completely different person now where you just need to...
I think I'm a different person, but there's glimpses of me. the old Sarah. There's glimpses of me, but the trouble is there's still a lot of abuse from afar, so you never really get on your feet without the next episode. Friends, support people to because you're then flung into the legal system. Yeah, where I've been to court many times. The first time I had the fight of my life to prove my sanity. Well, that's actually very difficult to prove your sanity. I'd never lost my sanity, but that was used as a tool to take the children away from me. It's an ongoing journey and self-care, but that's quite difficult. It's really it reminded me of when I was at school. We learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you just go, you didn't take any notice of it. But literally, I had one thing: air, not food, water, and that's what I was saying was the physical abuse. But as time's gone on, it's been rosy, and I have to say, even though the last bit has been rather depressing. There's nothing that beats the freedom of not being with them anymore. So if anyone's listening, yes, it's a hard journey, but the freedom to make your own decisions, to watch whatever you want on TV, and to see your children develop and grow again is worth everything.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe at that point, Levi, we might sort of wrap this up, because that's the way you described, Sarah, your journey, for me, has been one of step by step by step understanding, getting a really good feel for what was happening in your life. But at the end of the day, we suddenly see a rose starting to bloom. But,
yes.
Because you start to come out of it and you recover, or start to recover. And I think what you've said is what I've heard many women say is, you never really ever recover.
Yes.
It's just part of the process. You become a survivor, and certainly you've said to me that's how you feel and sense yourself now. So we really appreciate the fact that you've come along today and been prepared to share such a personal story that many people wouldn't be able to share. So thank you for that. And that really, I think, in many ways, is going to be really useful, not just for men, because hopefully this is a program for men, but there will be some women who will watch it as well. So survivors like yourself who will see it, they'll take, what's the word I'm after, Levi? They'll take...
You're throwing me on the spot.
they'll be empowered and encouraged by what you've said. So thank you very much. I think I did write down something, and that was that the fact that you see yourself now as a survivor, and that to me, and again, I think when we had Deb Sanasi, who again went through a very similar situation to you, that's how she sees herself now. So all great to you in terms of, I just hope that continues to work for you as you move on. Now, guys, we just want to talk a little bit about our next conversation. We've only got a couple more to go until we've finished this series. So our next conversation is about guys trying to get you to take a stand, to stand up and be prepared to be accountable, and be prepared to push back on guys that you may see, that your mates who are telling a sexist joke or whatever. We want you to be able to take a stand and push back. So that's our next conversation, Levi. I'm looking forward to that one. We have a guest coming on for that one who will help us to talk through the issues and talk about the behaviours. So, Levi, why don't you sort of wrap up for the day, and then we'll be able to sort of...
Thanks, Warren. Appreciate that. Again, thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate your time and wisdom on this topic. We know how hard you mentioned you were quite nervous coming in, but it is really important, and I think it's going to shed light on a lot of the stereotypes we were talking about on what it is like to be a survivor, and the certain effects it can have on a person and on a family. So it's important to note our main target audience are male perpetrators. So I guess in saying that, guys, it's important to recognize if you are having any of these feelings or feel like your partner is feeling how Sarah was, maybe it's time to have a look and assess if there is abuse happening in the household. In saying that, we'd like to say thank you all for listening to Sarah's amazing story. If you would like to contact us or give us any feedback, you can contact us at goodmenproject@hca.org.au for the feedback process, or if you just want to comment on this episode, that's completely fine. If you would like any resources, you could contact us or go to the website www.hca.org.au. That's www.hca.org.au. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next episode. All right. See you guys.
Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us. This podcast is for information and educational purposes. The views expressed by the hosts and their guests are their own views and do not constitute professional advice. Listeners should consult professionals for specific advice tailored to their needs. We make no representation or warranties concerning the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of the information in the podcast.